going on, Penn State fans? Max Ralph here. Obviously, I'm in the car. I'm signing off from the NFL Combine. Got our photographer and social media expert, Joe Hermit, leading the way. If you didn't see what he did this week, make sure you check it out. Did a great job on our PSU Football Proud Instagram and our Steelers on Penn Live Instagram. A lot of really interesting stuff from all the prospects we talked to this week. But yeah, we're signing out. I didn't give you an update yesterday, so I want to talk a little bit about the Penn State guys we talked to. We had Tyler Warren, KJ Winston, and Jaylen Reed yesterday, Thursday. Warren, as always, I mean, we talked to him just about every week while he was at Penn State, so, you know, used to him being a really well put together interview. Had a lot of good things to say. We also got a couple extra minutes with him for those of us on the Penn State beat who traveled out. He's not sure if he's going to go to the draft, but he will. He did not work out, will not work out this week. Is still up in the air about the pro day as well. But basically the feeling that I gathered from him and from talking to a few people, there's not really any reason for him to work out right now. He's going to be in the middle of the first round, maybe even the early first round, as high as the top 5. And if you're in that situation and you put out the tape that he put out, teams don't really need to see anything from you on the field in terms of running, whatever. Really, the only thing he can do is decrease his draft stock if he runs a bad 40 or if his shuttle time is bad or whatever. So I really like Tyler Warren in this draft. You know, I don't necessarily have a prediction for where he's going to go like I do with Abdul Carter. I could really see him going number 1 or number 4, I think, are my favorite landing spots for him. A lot of mocks for Warren to the Saints at 9, maybe the Dolphins, the Colts, the Broncos, even the Bengals, I think, in the middle of the first round. Those are probably my top picks, but I don't necessarily have a true projection for him. Had really good things to say about Luke Reynolds, of course, the second-year Penn State tight end. I had a little bit in my story over on Penn Live, and you know, I've got a lot more coming from Warren, from all these guys we've talked to over the next week or so. KJ Winston obviously didn't play at all really this season. He played one game, was incredible, 12 tackles, forced fumble, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, but then got hurt in practice that week. That's the new news we learned. It was suffered in practice that week, partially torn ACL that held him out for the year. A lot of people thought, oh, maybe he can come back for the playoff run, because when James Franklin said it was a long-term injury, we didn't necessarily know what that meant, because in the past he'd said season ending, but I do think there's confirmation now after talking with KJ that the reason he only said long-term is because it was such a long season. He didn't want to rule out any kind of crazy scenario where they played into late January and got somebody back. But KJ had surgery on October 1st for that partially torn ACL. And yeah, he was never going to come back. Decided that he always knew he was going to be physically ready to play in the NFL. He needed this year. He needed some time to make sure his mental side of the game was ready for it. And he said he talks a lot with Jair Brown about that. And KJ is always a really friendly guy, good interview. I think he's going to do well. Looking like second round, maybe third at the worst, but I do think he'll be a day 2 pick. If he would have played, I think he'd be a first rounder, but he was really good. Jaylen Reed's in a similar boat, you know. I do think that he was always kind of one of the more underrated players in the country this year. He'll certainly be quick to tell you the same thing. He has a lot of confidence, certainly does not lack it. But, you know, he's a really good player. He did a lot for Penn State. His versatility was huge. In talking to him, that's what he said. NFL teams have really appreciated that he can play all 3 positions at safety, free safety, strong safety, nickel cornerback, get up into the box. And I think, even though the national recognition for him may be a little bit on the lower end, I think what he said is second to 4th round. So I think people are starting to take notice. I think he's going to have a good day, probably a day 2 pick, much like KJ Winston. So, you know, Anthony Poindexter has really started to churn out safeties in that room. These 2 guys are the next ones up. And then the final guy we talked to here on this Friday morning, right before we dipped out of town, Keandre Lambert-Smith, of course, controversial name in the Penn State world, the former wide receiver who transferred to Auburn. As we kind of expected, got the feeling that his ties to Penn State were, you know, they're minimal these days. He said he does still talk to Marcus Hagans every now and then, and got wished luck from the wide receivers coach who was there in his last year. But he said he decided to stay at Penn State through the spring window before transferring to get his degree, and then, you know, was just sold on Auburn as soon as he took his visit. Thought that his year there, and he had a good year. If I'm remembering correctly, he put up over 1,000 yards, and he said it rebuilt his confidence. Keandre is a confident guy, and was never afraid to show it. But I mean, look, when you struggle like you do for 4 years at Penn State, it's understandable for that to go down. And he said he built it back up. Thought that he also showed that he can make contested catches, which was huge for him. And he also said, interestingly enough, I asked him kind of what common theme has been in his meetings with NFL teams so far, and he said they asked him a lot about why he left Penn State. And you know, I think the story is pretty well told by now. You know, just not a good fit in the room on both sides of that. And you know, he didn't say that outright or anything. He was very respectful and made good answers today. I really do think he has a shot at being a draft pick this year, and you know, sticking around on an NFL team for a little while. I think he'll be a good player. But yeah, Keandre was good today. You know, appreciated hearing from him again for the first time in a while. Really good experience out at the Combine this week. Make sure you're following along with us. We're gonna have a ton of stuff over the next week or so, because there's a lot in those interviews. We had 15 to 20 minutes with all those guys, and only scratching the surface of what we can do. A lot of stuff about their views on the future of Penn State too. So, you know, stay tuned with us. The draft comes in April. Gonna be a fun one. Thanks for checking us out this week, and see you back in State College.
Peace.